Are you tired of running the same old predictable dungeons, or are you just struggling on where to get started? Well, today I'm going to help you change both of those things. Whether you're a seasoned GM or just starting out, you'll find actionable tips and tricks to take your dungeon to the next level. You know, if your dungeon has more than one floor, or floor. So, what are dungeons? Well, they're not just prisons under castles. In games and game design, a dungeon is a closed-off area where challenges lie, an internal cell with something in it, rather than the boundless open world that we're all used to. Take Skyrim as an example. There are literal dungeons, but a dungeon could be a cave, or you could even consider a house, a castle, or a manor of some kind to be a dungeon, because they're a separate space. But before we start brainstorming ideas on making your next wonderful dungeon, you need to ask yourself, how are you going to run a dungeon? I love dungeons and I love running them, but how fun they are to play in and to run them wholly depends on how you are playing through one. Because we're leaving the big bright world and we're going into a space with rooms that have specific sizes and a specific number of rooms and a specific location where traps are. Relaying information about what is inside can be incredibly hard and confusing, and an unfortunate truth is that theatre of the mind, aka describing what players see, can be an exercise in frustration, because unless you're exploring a series of 10 by 10 copy and pasted rooms with plain white walls and one door in them, your players are going to feel like they're walking blind through the back rooms. If you're rushing to the comments right now to tell me that you've never had this problem, then good for you. But go tell your parents instead. See if they're proud.
Chill!
My top tip is, if you're at the table, provide some kind of visual aid. You could use dungeon tiles and build it as the players explore. Or you could print off the entire dungeon plan and reveal parts of it as the players explore. Or you could literally bring some paper, gridded if possible, and either you or a trusted artistic player can draw what you describe. Printed or drawn floor plans, which is hard to say, also means that the players can label and plan with the map that they have. It can be super fun to build or draw their map together. The other option is, of course, if you're playing online or your friend is bougie and has an entire TV in their table, then you can use a virtual tabletop. With virtual tabletops, you can use fog of war features and make the maps look as pretty as you like by getting the maps online from the likes of 2 Minute Tabletop, or making your own with tools like Incarnate. But the thing is, using these can be taxing and require a lot of prep. Unless you use tools like Tabletop. I've been playing with another group recently, and it's amazing how each one of the people in the group have the exact same complaints when addressing the VTTs that are already out there. Complaints that I can confidently say are addressed with Tabletop. You can switch between rooms or whole levels of a dungeon by just simply placing a button, and with a click of your mouse, your players are instantly brought into the next level of madness that you have conjured. Also, even when you have the greatest VTT guiding you through your dungeon crawl, some players might need to head out to the bathroom or take an urgent call, and just like that, oh no, my gorgeous GM, what happened when I was gone? Well, don't worry your gorgeous little face, just look at Tabletop's AI companion that tracks relevant actions taken by the players to see a play-by-play or room-by-room account of your adventure. And yes, I do mean relevant actions, because Tabletop's handy little familiar can tell when you're talking about Pete's choice to wear Crocs and socks today, and when you're planning on which door to take. So click the links in the description to see Tabletop's Kickstarter and their socials to stay up to date with what I can guarantee is going to be the best option for the VTT using TTRPG community. And now, let's build a dungeon. By first asking, what is this place? I'm so ill today. Consider what the purpose of the dungeon is. Not on like a game design level, but in your world. Why is there a dungeon here? Ask yourself, what was the original purpose and what is its current purpose? Because depending on the kind of dungeon you're dealing with, these answers can vary. So, here are some ideas. The dungeon is an actual dungeon that was built underground to contain the worst of the worst, or the best of the best who know too much. The dungeon is an ancient magic school that used to be above ground, but after a meld with stone spell went wrong, the whole school sank underground. Maybe it was originally built as a mine in a dwarven valley, or a company-owned asteroid base. Any building you can think of could conceivably be hidden away. Perhaps it was built by cave dwellers, it sank due to natural disasters, or any other reason. I mean, look at dwarves. Aren't they cute? They build in mountains, so why wouldn't any other society make a city underground? Very defensible. Maybe a desert society built underground to stay cool. Go wild. But what about its current purpose? If an ancient dungeon was built, it's probable that the original occupants have left or died out. So, in that case, who is there now? And what do they use it for? Maybe a band of orc rangers cleared the castle ruins and set up camp in the dungeons so they could wait for a human army to pass over them and then launch a flanking attack. Maybe a mad scientist carries out experiments to resurrect all the available corpses inside. Or maybe it's simply just a home for any squatting animal, monster or alien you can think of. We need to know this information about the dungeon so we can fill it with fitting ideas, like it'd be unlikely to find a full nuclear reactor inside of an abandoned prison that is now being used as a shelter by some wolves. But, you know, maybe that is there, and if so, make sure you know why. Now that we know what this dungeon is, it's now time to ask, what's in here? And here is my top tip for building dungeons. Not every dungeon needs to be a colossal complex of stuff. While you may want to make a whole university or prison, remember, shorter and more interesting is way better than longer and boring. If you put down another room just because some YouTuber or resource said I need to have this many rooms, or you say, I just need another room, get rid of it. If you make a big dungeon, make every room have a reason to exist. But you might be asking, why am I telling you to lower the amount of rooms? Because if you make a dungeon that feels realistically sprawling, what will happen is your players will walk through the dungeon, make a spot hidden roll in every room, find that there is mostly nothing, and wonder why you're making them plod through nothing. And also, just a small thing, don't have a corridor where there's 20 small rooms like prison cells dotted along it, because what you thought was going to be a jump scare in one of these rooms is just going to be your players saying, we check all the rooms, making this corridor completely pointless. There is great virtue in having a dungeon that might have 5 or 6 rooms. There's a starting point, there is somewhere with an actual encounter, a diversion with something maybe like a trap to cause a setback, a climactic battle or encounter at the end, and then a reward at the very, very end. That's an entire encounter in only 5 rooms. If you want this complex to feel more realistic, like a whole university or a prison, then just say that a huge chunk of it is submerged, lost, caved in, destroyed, or whatever, and with the remaining dungeon, fill these rooms with interesting stuff. Players remember the unique and interesting, and not the realistic and boring. Okay, so I've covered what not to have, but just thinking of ideas for dungeons can be daunting to some, so let's take it step by step. First up, how do you get in? Is there a front door leading to a grand entrance hall? Is there a crack in the earth leading to a random chamber in the dungeon? Is there a simple trapdoor and a ladder leading to a foul-smelling dwelling? Or is there something wacky like you need to take a teleporter in? Whatever the method of entrance is, it's probably to do with the original purpose of the dungeon. And that was the front door, but now we have corridors, and keep them short and simple. Unless there's like a specific purpose to them, like a long corridor filled with spike traps. And here is a fairly nuanced and unheard of tip. Rooms are where the interesting stuff is, as we know, but since combat is less likely to occur in a corridor, feel free to fill the corridors with flavour. These seemingly boring strings that connect your rooms can be where clues, notes, and mini-stories can be. If there is a puzzle in the next room, giving your players some flavour or clues to absorb can get them mentally prepared for the next mental challenge. And now we exit a corridor into a room. And rooms, like real life, are where people gather to carry out a purpose with more space. So, start by asking yourself, what is this room for? Was or is this place a university? Think of all the rooms that you would need. Lecture halls, storage, laboratories. Think of the many subjects at school. Each of them needs a teaching area and a supply cupboard, and maybe an office. You don't need to make the purpose of every room incredibly interesting, just what the players find in it. If you immediately think of puzzles and traps, then go ahead and put those in. Did the original occupants or the current occupants put them in place? And if you want more information on puzzles and traps, then I will do so in my own video, but as a preview, look at puzzles that already exist in games. Could you tweak them to fit your dungeon's theme? But remember, you don't need puzzles and traps. You can put anything interesting in any room. You could have a room that used to be a supply cupboard. Boring? Well, maybe if you ignore the invincible monster that accidentally mutated from the preserved chemicals in the dungeon after it was abandoned, the monster that can only be defeated by fending it off while the smart character in the group figures out which combination of the remaining chemicals can destroy this abomination. What can turn all these disconnected but interesting ideas into a cohesive unit? Have the things in the dungeon tell a story. If you find loot, what is it? Here's an idea for you. The players find a headband of the Surveyor, a headpiece worn by the warden of this subterranean prison. A very special headpiece that gives you a bonus to lore and history rolls, and on a critical success, it actually gives a security camera style playback of events that you're trying to recall. But when the player first puts it on, it shows them a group of guards and prisoners alike being brutally savaged by some eldritch abomination, and as soon as they begin to wonder what the heck it is, the playback disappears. What was that? You tell me. See? You can make items that inform the players of the dungeon's story and history, with clues, or by giving them some out-of-the-ordinary way of getting the info. Obra Dinn style. And if you're struggling of like what encounters, combat or otherwise to have in the dungeon, here is the secret to dungeon design. All the skills you have for making encounters in any other scenario outside the dungeon still apply here. The only difference is the encounter is now connected to the story of the dungeon rather than the whole adventure. That's right, because like nearly everything I talk about on this channel, you can bring any creation you make together with a little bit of flavour, bringing the themes and the content together in harmony. So, to end off, let's look at some fantastic examples of flavourful dungeons. Frostflow Lighthouse from Skyrim is an example of how you don't need a compelling quest to make a really great story. It's a natural cave that is a spawning ground for gross monsters, but it's elevated beyond that by a tragic murder mystery and a tale of revenge. Also, to any that aren't scarred from doing the Winterhold questline a million times, Sarthal is full of lore, flavour, and it's the starting point to a quest about a family of ghostly warriors. Take notes from these. If you want your dungeon to be fun and interesting, make exploring and fighting through the dungeon fun with encounters, and have it be rich with mystery and lore to find and puzzle through. But in my humble opinion, there are no better story-rich, mysterious and fun dungeons than the vaults from Fallout. Vault 108 brings you the funny of Gary, but the best for your purposes are Vault 22 for a monster-filled dungeon crawl. Vaults 106, 92, 34, 51 have long-ago stories of strange experiments that can still affect the players as they progress through the dungeon. And if you like to weave a dark story, look no further than Vault 11 and Vault 75. The highlight of these vaults for you as a GM is the way that they spread the information, so your players can experience a story that unfolds piece by horrifying piece. If I was to make a dungeon right now, I would make it so that it was a not too big of a collection of rooms, combats that the players can choose to dive or sneak into, strange sights and clues that tell of the dungeon purpose and story, and some loot. Why not? Also, side note, if you want a tool to inspire the shape of your dungeon, I'm a link to Donjon in the description. It's good to get your imagination flowing. I wouldn't take the stuff directly off the site, you might need to tweak it a little bit. And hey, it's all well and good hearing this advice, but it's useless without action. So, go make a dungeon, have fun and see how much more your players appreciate it. And let me know how your previous dungeon crawling and creation has gone in your previous sessions in the comments. I'm Ellis, leave a like to help out the channel and check out the description for my socials and products. Also, if you want a game full of tomb delving adventure, click the video on screen to get a glimpse into a TTRPG that I am making. I love you all and I'll see you next Saturday.